Tonight, Joe Biden cancels a campaign speech after testing positive for COVID. Democrats in disarray with the U.S. president fighting for political survival.
If the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem.
Republicans rally around a new running mate. J.D. Vance steps into the spotlight. The messy cleanup from a major summer storm and questions about why Toronto wasn't ready.
Continue to be making investments in resilient infrastructure.
Plus, is it safe to swim in the Seine? The billion-dollar gamble for the Games. Also, the new video of a crazy crane collapse. And storybook style.
There is elements to glamping, but there's also amenities.
The cushy Canadian camping experience.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Mirella Fernandez.
Good evening. The U.S. president has tested positive for COVID. It is another blow for Joe Biden, who is already fighting off Democrat detractors. A new critic registered concerns today, further splintering the support on the left, while on the right, Republicans are aligned on a big night at their convention. CTV's Joy Melvin starts us off.
Battled President Joe Biden on the campaign trail in another crucial swing state, Nevada. Fighting to keep his job and his party united, now another blow. The president tested positive for COVID-19. Vaccinated and boosted, Biden is experiencing mild symptoms.
How do you feel?
A runny nose, cough, no fever, and the president was given a dose of Paxlovid. The White House says he's returning home to Delaware, where he will self-isolate and continue to carry out his duties fully during that time.
He can't win.
The president was already struggling as a drip, drip, drip of Democrats call for him to drop out of the race, saying he's too old, too weak to take on Donald Trump. Still trying to salvage his candidacy after that disastrous debate, yet another prominent Democrat, Adam Schiff, fearing a Democratic wipeout, called on Biden to pass the torch. I think if he's the nominee, we will lose. In a new interview, Biden was asked what would make him change his mind.
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem.
A letter circulating among party members urges the Democratic National Committee to delay a virtual roll call that would finalize Biden as the nominee as early as next week. Calls for him to go had calmed down after former President Donald Trump was nearly killed by a would-be assassin's bullet. But the campaign ads are back up and running on abortion, branding Trump and his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, as extremists.
J.D. Vance. Trump looked for someone he knew would be a rubber stamp for his extreme agenda, and make no mistake, J.D. Vance will be loyal only to Trump, not to our country.
As Democrats feel more divided, the Republicans have united, a party falling in line after nearly a decade of infighting over Trump's polarizing politics. His political rivals all vanquished on the convention floor. It's a bit of a love-in for the man and his message.
This is our last chance to make America great again.
Trump's brush with death resonating with Republicans, confident the race has shifted in their favor.
It's time to put that flag on your front porch, that red hat on your head, because we don't cave and we don't cower and we do not capitulate.
Trump now the great unifier. He and his family will be here tomorrow night, his children, grandkids, his wife Melania, when he formally accepts the Republican nomination, making his first public remarks after surviving that assassination attempt. Mirella?
Joy's in Milwaukee, where Republicans heard tonight from their new nominee for U.S. Vice President. J.D. Vance got a rock star's welcome in Milwaukee.
Thank you, please. I want all Americans to go and watch the video of a would-be assassin coming a quarter of an inch from taking his life. Consider the lies they told you about Donald Trump, and then look at that photo of him, defiant, fist in the air, when Donald Trump rose to his feet in that Pennsylvania field, all of America stood with him.
All right, let's go to our political specialist, Vashi Kapellos, at the convention. Vashi, this did seem to be a more restrained Vance. What's your take?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Morella. I think I'll jump off where Joy left off when she was saying that Vice President Harris is attempting to paint Vance as extreme, in the same way that Democrats say that Donald Trump is extreme, and certainly there are facts to back up that argument in some cases. This speech was aimed at countering that message. This is a speech for the mainstream. I have no doubt about it. Just as expected, Vance focused a lot on his upbringing, the fact that he was born, in impoverished circumstances, that he was able to make of his life what he did, and he used it to contrast the policies and the ways of Donald Trump with Joe Biden. He wasn't too negative on Joe Biden. He hit on NAFTA and a few other things that he was critical of Joe Biden for, but mostly this was about painting a picture of, as he and Republicans view it, the kind of hope, you could say, that they are attempting to paint for people, particularly in the working class. He's saying, I was one of them, and now, more of you can chart a path that I did if J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are successful in November. Obviously, the Democrats would counter that. They would take a very different view, and you heard it from Kamala Harris there in Joy's piece. But this speech, I think at this point in time, it hasn't quite wrapped, is very much aimed at countering the narrative the Democrats are trying to put out there, that he and Donald Trump are extreme MAGA Republicans.
Vashti, all right, thanks for the update. Appreciate it. And CTV National News will be live Thursday from Milwaukee, where Donald Trump will address delegates at the Republican National Convention. American senators learned today the gunman who shot at Trump was flagged as being suspicious more than an hour before the shooting. 20-year-old Thomas Crooks was found with a fireworks detonator and had apparently scoped out the venue days before the rally.
The director of the Secret Service needs to go.
The Secret Service briefed lawmakers on the investigation. The agency is being raked over the coals for failing to protect the former U.S. president. Security is a key issue for Canada's premiers. They want the federal government to meet its NATO spending target faster. They're worried the Canada-U.S. relationship will take a hit if Trump returns to the White House and Ottawa hasn't anteed up. Here's CTV's Judy Trin.
13 premiers, all united in their calls for Canada to meet its 2% GDP NATO spending obligation much sooner in order to safeguard economic interests.
I think it's broader for Canada in its relationship with the United States. We're significant trading partners, and we want them to respect us.
Bonjour tout le monde.
At last week's NATO summit, after mounting pressure from allies, the Prime Minister announced a 2032 date for reaching that target. That's 8 years away. The premiers want the deadline moved up. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement is up for review in 2026.
I think the timeline we have to think about is the next administration, whoever that may be, in the United States of America. So let's hit that target in the next 4 years with a credible plan to do so.
The premiers have been watching Donald Trump's surging presidential race. They're concerned about a déjà vu. When Trump was first elected in 2016, he put in place the America First trade policy. There's concern he'll use military spending shortfalls as a reason to cut trade with Canada, putting provincial economies at risk.
We do $500 billion of trade, Ontario alone, with the U.S.
Earlier this year, Trump reiterated his position that the U.S. will stop defending allies that don't meet their NATO obligations. Canada's annual defense budget is around $30 billion. Getting to 2% fast could require $15 billion more a year.
You could do that by raising revenue. You could do it by spending less on other functions of government and providing a fiscal offset, or you could borrow more money.
The premiers say Canada should hit that NATO target earlier, regardless of a Republican or a Democrat win. Back in Canada, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who is way ahead in the polls, has not committed to reaching that 2% target should he become Prime Minister. Judy Trin, CTV News, Halifax.
Toronto will need to invest in flood protection. The city got bombarded by a month's worth of rain in just 3 hours yesterday. The cleanup is costly, and as CTV's Heather Wright reports, there are questions about why the city wasn't better prepared.
The water is gone, but the damage is done.
The mold and the disgustingness of the water and all those issues, you're like, well, I need to get this properly cleaned and taken care of.
100 millimeters of rain fell on parts of Toronto in just a few hours yesterday, the fifth rainiest day in the city's recorded history. And while some homeowners have insurance to cover this type of flooding, many do not.
Confirm that you actually have sewer backup or flood coverage. It is an optional coverage, so you have to purchase it.
You can see some of the damage here at this nursing home in Mississauga. The force of the water shattering all of these first floor windows. You can see all of the damage here. Water gushing inside and really flooding the entire first floor of this building.
The entire building had to be evacuated, with first responders rescuing residents and staff by boat. In total, a dozen people were pulled from submerged cars along Toronto's Don Valley Parkway, with the city saying it will review its response to yesterday's storm, including the decision to not close the DVP sooner.
The situation changed pretty significantly, and when that shifted, we needed to pivot to try and ensure the safety of the folks that were caught in that storm.
The Prime Minister was in Toronto today and says preparing cities for the next storm is critical.
We continue to be making investments in resilient infrastructure that can handle what the future is holding.
But Toronto has experienced this before. Many of the places that flooded yesterday were the same ones buried in water 11 years ago.
We'll repair and renew our infrastructure.
And while the total cost of Tuesday's storm is still being calculated, the Insurance Bureau of Canada says it will likely top $1 billion, most of which will be paid for by the government and homeowners. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
Torrential rain also hit the U.S. hard, killing at least one person.
The whole town of Yellville is flooded over there, boys.
Bridges, homes, businesses all washed away in Ozarks, Arkansas, leading to a flash flood emergency. Severe weather also hit upstate New York. A rare tornado left a community devastated. Dramatic new video of the moment a crane fell from a South Florida high-rise. It came crashing onto a car, killing a construction worker. This happened in April. Somehow the driver of the vehicle freed herself. Swimming in the Seine, the river that runs through Paris, has been illegal for over a century. But the city's mayor dove in today to prove a point that $1 billion cleanup was worthwhile. CTV Geneviève Beauchemin reports.
Parisians lined the shores of the River Seine to watch their mayor, Anne Hidalgo, trade her fashionable suits for a wetsuit and goggles. With a few strokes, she tried to prove the Seine is fit for the games.
It's a very lucky and happy day. It's also for the planet.
The Seine is to be the scene of not just the opening ceremony, but also the open water swim and the swimming leg of the triathlon. But in June, tests showed it was not safe for swimming on most days, contaminated with E. coli bacteria. That had some athletes worrying.
Definitely a big point of anxiety for me, especially since this is my first games.
For a century, the Seine was so polluted it was off limits, illegal to swim. It is still riddled with relics of Paris's turbulent past.
Là, par exemple, c'est une balle.
This is a bullet, says this magnet fisher. We find them often because of the war. Paris launched an Olympic challenge to clear this river in time for the Games, investing nearly $2 billion over years.
It's so meaningful to use the Games to transform the city of Paris, to leave a very important legacy.
Still, unseasonably high rainfalls in the spring sent bacteria levels spiking, forcing organizers to set up a plan B if need be. But the tide turned in recent weeks with sunnier, drier weather and better test results. Canada's Olympic team is keeping a close eye on the river.
The water quality is being strictly monitored. Now there's a plan B, we feel a lot better. And I think that it will actually go ahead and there will be the marathon race in the Seine, which will be fantastic.
Many are thrilled to reclaim the river lost for so long to pollution, but not all Parisians are convinced quite yet.
J'aime pas la couleur de l'eau.
I don't like the color of the water, she says. I hope the mayor doesn't break out into hives for the game's opening ceremony. Now, organizers are hoping for dry, sunny weather because any sort of rainfall could push up bacteria levels yet again. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
Coming up.
It's a good use of border officers' time. So there's a lot of issues at the border.
New rules for crossing into the U.S. with a pooch. Plus, the storybook resort enchanting children of all ages. In Thailand, 6 bodies have been found at a luxury hotel in Bangkok. All have tested positive for cyanide, and police say they think the suspected killer is among the dead. One person likely poisoned everyone over a financial dispute. The poison was found on teacups and in the blood of the guests. They were last seen alive when food was served to their room on Monday. The FBI is assisting in the investigation because 2 of the victims are American citizens. The U.S. is rolling out more red tape for Canadians who want to bring their dogs across the border. The rules will change on August 1st. There is a longer list of requirements that may deter some Canadians from traveling with their pets. CTV's Sarah Plowman reports.
Hey, come on up. Shamrock goes wherever his owner does. In a few weeks, he'll head to Maine to shop.
Yeah, you got to come to the States with us, buddy.
As of August 1st, they'll have to pack paperwork for the dog. Starting then, dogs entering the U.S. will have to be at least 6 months old, have a universally readable microchip, appear healthy, and have documents, including a U.S. Centers for Disease Control form receipt and an export document that includes proof of rabies vaccination, microchip, and a sign by a Canadian veterinarian.
I think it's too much. Valuable resources are being used up to check our dogs.
U.S. authorities argue the rules will help stop the spread of rabies. Ottawa has been in talks with their U.S. counterparts, and today the health minister noted some rules have eased, but not far enough.
What am I asking for? An exemption. I've been very clear with the Secretary. I think Canada should be exempt as a country that is not a source country for rabies.
Some have tweaked travel plans. Cisco's owners will go to the States before August 1st to avoid any trouble.
The changes seem a bit abrupt and pretty kind of, forced.
The New Brunswick Medical Veterinary Association wants dog owners to plan ahead.
Please don't panic. And please have patience because we're navigating this too.
Minister Holland says he's waiting for confirmation of a grace period.
Where folks are given a warning at the border for the first couple of months.
While dog owners add call the vet to their to-do list.
A spokesperson for the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Protection tells me they are aware of concerns, value feedback, and are working with both federal and international partners to discuss it. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
Still ahead, the Eras effect in the UK. Why Taylor Swift fans are being blamed for boosting the economy. Taylor Swift's Eras tour is taking the blame for keeping inflation flat in the UK. Economists had expected it to drop last month, but it turns out Swifties who came in from out of town had hotels and restaurants raking it in. CTV's Alison Bamford reports.
A moment worth traveling overseas just to see.
It was 3 hours of solid entertainment and a really good atmosphere.
Haley Cattell flew to Europe last month for the Eras tour. Her entire 2-week trip, she estimates, cost what some fans will pay for a weekend to see Taylor Swift in Canada later this year.
We were able to find rooms in a hostel that were honestly comparable to any hostel or traveler hostel that you can find in Europe.
She may be one of the lucky ones. New reports out of the UK show hotel prices jumped nearly 9% in the month of June when Swift performed 10 nights across the United Kingdom. Some economists believe the price increase led to the UK's inflation rate flatlining at 2% last month instead of falling like some expected.
It's highly likely that it's a temporary bump.
Last summer, Swift was credited with single-handedly boosting the hotel industry in the United States.
Welcome to the Eras Tour.
The Canadian industry hopes for similar numbers when the megastar visits Toronto in November.
It's definitely going to be a huge opportunity in a time of the year when there isn't as much going on from a business perspective.
Based on her U.S. stops, the association expects the 6 concert dates to inject more than $50 million into the economy, a potential boost so big others are practically begging Swift to come to their cities.
Citywide rebrand.
Swift Current Saskatchewan hopes its shared name will entice the singer and her following to tour the community.
Probably temporarily change the name of the city for a day or two to Taylor Swift Current or just Taylor Swift.
Swift is set to close out her tour in Vancouver in December. Hotel prices already skyrocketing there for tens of thousands of Swifties expected to visit. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
After the break, finding happily ever after, the storybook experience on offer in Alberta. Once upon a time, there was a pandemic that forced some business owners to abandon their plans to build playhouses. They came up with a new project, fabricating fairy tale cottages inspired by the make-believe characters children have come to love. CTV's Kathy Lee shows us the resort that brings beasts and beanstalks to the cottage experience.
Magical, whimsical, childhood dreams, now real life.
It feels like you're in a storybook village, right in the middle of nowhere.
Nowhere is actually Charmed Resort, south of Calgary. The 16 cottages inspired by famous tales.
It has gumdrops and it has icing.
She's talking about the gingerbread house, but there's also Captain Hook's pirate ship and this one from Jack and the Beanstalk, a glamorous way of camping.
There is elements to glamping, but there's also amenities.
The resort, a pivot from a luxury playhouse business that struggled during COVID, now thriving because of customers' wants.
I think the most important is the experience that the kids will remember.
And more are seeking out those unique experiences.
The searches are actually growing like 20% year over year. They just don't want to have the same old experience all the time. They want to enjoy, with family.
That quality time not exclusive to only accommodations.
They can have a meaningful experience at a concert or sporting event or a natural phenomenon. With air travel bookings, it's certainly up from the same time last year.
And a study reveals 3 in 5 Canadians plan to vacation this summer. The average family intending to spend just over $2,700, which is almost $25 billion collectively. They're enjoying those special experiences even with a more expensive price tag.
I'd say we're maybe 10 or 20% of a regular hotel, but the experience is far beyond that. The market tells us that they want the more expensive cottage.
They want the castle.
And they want the lifetime of memories. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Blairmore, Alberta.
That's a wrap on the day. Thanks for sharing your time. For all of us here at CTV National News, good night. Omar will be back with you tomorrow.